A team of kids no one wants, a drunk as a head coach, America's greatest pastime? All of this can only mean one thing. We're comparing the Bad News Bears on this episode of Retro versus Remake.
I'm Reggie Parker.
And I'm Dan Bulick. Welcome to another episode of Retro versus Remake, the podcast where we discuss films and their remakes. Join us as we explore the question, should this remake exist? Today's film is The Bad News Bears. The Bad News Bears, 1976, starring Walter Matthau, Tatum O'Neal, Jack Earle Haley, Vic Morrow, and Joyce Van Patten. Directed by Michael Ritchie. Screenplay by Bill Lancaster. Music by Jerry Fielding. Bad News Bears, they dropped the, so it's just Bad News Bears, 2005, starring Billy Bob Thornton, Greg Kinnear, Marcia Gay Harden, Sammy Kane Kraft, and Jeffrey Davis. Directed by Richard Linklater. Screenplay by Glenn Ficarra and John Requa. Music by Ed Shermer. All right, Reggie, what is your first experience with either film?
I remember the remake because just like when we watched The Longest Yards, there was sort of like a string of films like this where they were taking old properties, especially in the sports genre. And I remember seeing this film in the past. It didn't stick with me quite as much as The Longest Yard, but I definitely remember watching this in the Billy Bob character. The original I watched, similar thing like whenever I was doing like film study and stuff like that, I was like, well, I've seen this remake. Let me go check out the original. And I remember watching the original as more of just, I should see the original. Like, that's kind of how I watched it.
Okay, so you've seen both. Very nice. I only saw parts of the original before this podcast. I was in after school, and on half days we got to watch a movie. So one of the teachers decided, let's watch Bad News Bears. And it was like, I guess I was in third grade, so it's around like 1993 or something. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of swear words, a lot of damns and shits in the beginning of the movie, and I guess about after the third damn or shit, the teacher's like, okay, can't show this to you anymore. So it was the one and only movie I remember in after school that we weren't allowed to watch because of the language. And I wasn't that upset because it looked old, and I was like, I always hated when it was an old movie in after school, so I was okay with it. But that was my only experience with the Bad News Bears until watching both movies for this podcast. I had never seen the remake at all. I think I remember hearing about it, but it just wasn't on my radar or wasn't really interested in watching it. This was it.
That's interesting that you would say that. I'm sure we'll get into sort of the language and subject matter of the films, but you would think that this would be a film that children would want to watch, but there seem to be some barriers into letting kids kind of watch these particular films.
Oh yeah. Definitely. And we will definitely touch on those subjects. But before we do that, let's go over a brief synopsis. Morris Buttermaker is an ex-ball player who now spends most of his days drinking. He's been hired to coach the Little League team, the Bears, a team made up of kids that weren't good enough to join the other teams in the league. They are all terrible ball players. They curse, they whine, and get into fights. Buttermaker could care less. He just proceeds to get drunk. After acquiring the uniforms and having the kids carry out his day job, Game 1 is here. The first game goes terrible for the Bears. They lose so bad that Buttermaker forfeits the game before the Bears even get to bat. The kids then turn on their alcoholic coach. They all want to quit at the next practice, but Buttermaker has a change of heart and decides to teach the team how to be ball players. He also tries to recruit Amanda, a girl he trained to pitch years ago when he dated her mother. But Amanda refuses to join. The Bears have their second game and lose again. At least they played the whole game this time. Buttermaker is finally able to recruit Amanda, and she becomes the pitcher for the next game, which the Bears just barely lose. During their next practice, Buttermaker sees bad boy Kelly Leak and wants to recruit him for the team. He uses Amanda to convince him, but she fails and has to date him instead. At the next practice, the coach of the Yankees gives Kelly trouble, which makes him finally want to join the Bears. With Kelly on the team, the Bears start winning, and they win a lot. They get close to making the playoffs. Buttermaker then tells Kelly to take all the plays during the next game. He does, and his teammates start to turn against him. But Kelly's efforts pay off, and the Bears make the playoffs against the Yankees. Before the game, Amanda talks about hanging out with Buttermaker more after the season is over, but he angrily refuses. The playoffs are here, and the team hates Kelly for being a ball hog. Buttermaker tells the team that it was his idea, and they just need to do what he says to win. This carries out throughout the game. Buttermaker gets angry when players don't follow his orders, but then he composes himself. The Yankees have a minor meltdown too, as the coach snaps on his son, who then tries to throw the game. The last inning arrives and the Bears are ahead. Buttermaker decides to let the worst players on the team play, and ultimately lets the Bears have fun. They have fun, but now they're losing by many runs. The Bears make a valiant effort, but lose by 1 run. The Yankees, who've been picking on the Bears all season, tell the Bears that they've earned their respect. The Bears replies for the Yankees to shove their trophy up their asses, and they'll see them next year. The movie ends with the Bears celebrating, shaking up beers. So a lot of similarities there. Most of the names are the same. I was able to go into a lot of detail because the remake really does follow the original pretty much beat for beat. Where do you want to start, Reggie?
Yeah, I agree that because the movies in general from beat to beat are more or less the same, the key place for us to go is the differences. And I would say some of the most differences that you'll see in the film are the Buttermaker character himself.
Buttermaker. Morris Buttermaker. Portrayed in the original by Walter Matthau and in the remake by Billy Bob Thornton. And there are some significant differences here. Which area would you like to start?
Let's see. Let's start, I guess, from the beginning, actually. I do feel like Thornton, to me, feels like the better drunk in terms of, like, one of the things that drew me in at the beginning of the film is when we watched the two characters drinking as they're pulling up to the ballpark. And like you said, you get a very similar scene where Mathau's Buttermaker, he pours out some of his beer, which is alcoholic, and pours in some whiskey. And you get the same scene with Billy Bob, who's drinking a non-alcoholic beer, and he pours out most of his beer and replaces most of it with whiskey, which I thought was an interesting change that you're seeing. One that to some extent it feels like Billy Bob Thornton is aware that he has like some kind of drinking problem, so he's like using non-alcoholic beer, but it doesn't matter because he's still actually getting drunk off of like booze. And Walter's character just doesn't feel like, I mean, it's clear he's a drunk, but it doesn't seem like he's really addressing it at this point in the film.
So they both like to drink, like you said, though. Mathau was drinking the beer. And I'll just say this before we go on. The reason, most likely, that Billy Bob Thornton wasn't drinking beer is because the studio wasn't allowed to have beer in the dugout area on the ballpark with the kids. They said, you can't have this movie be PG-13 if there's beer on the field. So I think that was a studio decision that, like, okay, you have to have non-alcoholic beer for the remake. That could be a reason that he's doing the non-alcoholic beer. It could be a decision the character made, but that's most likely that it's the studio that made them do that.
Yeah, in that context, that makes sense because there's all kinds of rules you got to follow whenever you're working with kids, whether it's how many hours they work or something like that. So I could definitely see that being a note because it doesn't really change the fact that he's a drunk. So that's a good point, Dan. At this point, and I don't know if you have the same opinion, I sort of believe the Mathau's Buttermaker, the original Buttermaker, drinking a little bit more. I don't know if you had the same opinion.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He's definitely the drunk. You look at the two of them side by side, I mean, just looks-wise, you have Walter Matthau, who looks perpetually in his 70s, just like disheveled, scruffy, hair unkempt. And then you got Billy Bob over there. His facial hair is just like so well kept. It's like there's no way a drunk is going to keep that kind of, what was that, a goatee? Whatever facial thing he has going on. His hair looks like perfect. And he's like dressed really nice all the time. I mean, not like in suits or anything, but he's not just putting on whatever's on the ground. He looks like he's putting some thought into what he's wearing. He's definitely putting some thought into like how he looks. That's not drunk behavior. Drunk's like, I just woke up and I'm going to go where I need to go. Walter Matthau definitely captures that a lot more than Billy Bob's.
I 100% agree with you. I think maybe part of it is you see this Billy Bob character who, like you said, he doesn't quite look like a bum. Like there's times when Walter looks really rough around the edges. Like I said, Billy Bob is pretty clean kept. Women like him throughout the film. That's the major difference that we can talk about. Mm-hmm. Basically, for whatever reason, maybe because he's an ex-ball player in a small town. Well, it's not even a small town. He's in L.A. But maybe because he's an ex-ball player, people seem to respect him, and women seem to want to be around him. Like there's a lot of different women that he's dating throughout the film. Like when he goes to the bar and he's there with Paradise. At one point, one of the moms is into his bad boy sort of persona. It just felt like he had so much charisma and charm. It didn't feel like his drinking, outside of like the context of working with kids, it didn't seem like it was that big of a problem for him. Like it's life, besides his kind of dead end job, which we'll talk about, doesn't seem that bad.
Yeah, it didn't seem like exactly what you said. Like the drinking was holding him back. Like sure, he didn't have like the best job in the world, but like it wasn't because of the drinking. It seemed like it just seemed like maybe he's a little lazy or something. But like you said, he's still a ladies' man, and he doesn't look like a drunk who just got out of the gutter. But Walter Matthau, not a ladies' man, dressed terribly, looks terrible all the time. It looks like alcohol kind of did ruin his life. So just on that alone, I'm definitely going with the Walter Matthau portrayal.
There's something that to me felt sadder about his existence because it doesn't seem like Walter really enjoys like what's going on in his life. He's standoffish with the Amanda character, which we'll talk about, but he's just kind of pushing people away. Like he's not dating women, he's not really doing much at all with his life. And it seems like he's just accepted the fact that I'm not a people person. My best days are behind me, and now I drink. Whereas Billy Bob Thornton felt like this kind of like wise ass dude that, sure, he could be doing more if he really put his mind to it, but this is fine enough and it's working for me. Like his personality is shitty, but like I mentioned before, it doesn't really seem to be holding him back. It actually doesn't make sense that anybody would have him watching children because that seems to be like a known issue already. Whereas like Walter Matthau, it doesn't seem like anyone in the community is really that concerned about his behavior. They still sort of idolize him as a former ball player. Whereas like Billy Bob Thornton is actively kind of being a dick with everyone, and it just felt very different.
Yeah, that's a good point that you brought up. Like Walter Matthau, not really having fun as a drunk. Yeah, he's getting drunk a lot, but it's not really because he wants to have a good time. He's just kind of going through the motions, and it's like, I'm gonna drink, and one day I'll be dead. And then as opposed to Billy Bob, he's like, I'm drinking because I'm having fun. Look at me talking to all these hot 20-year-olds. I'm going to go hit on this softball player. I'm going to bring that stripper to the party. I know you said, like, maybe it's because he was a ball player who had charisma, but it's like, what woman in their 20s is going to be like, yeah, guy in his 50s who played in the majors for 2/3 of a quarter or 2/3 of an inning. Yeah, that's the guy I want to let hit on me. It's like, I didn't really buy it too much.
That's a great point because, I originally started to say small town, but it's not. It's L.A. There's so much going on. Even if they're in kind of like a crappier part of LA, it's still, you're near like the stars and celebrities. You're right. He's a guy who played barely any professional baseball. He's not a name. He's not rich, famous, and he just kind of acts like it. Like if the town was somewhere else, like maybe somewhere like Midwest,
yeah,
and he was the hottest thing going, I could get that. It's sort of like living in this world where like this matters, and you're right, it doesn't actually matter. It's just sort of like wasted opportunity, I guess. And you're right, why would a bunch of 20-year-olds want to date? I mean, let's call it a kind of creepy old guy.
Yeah, that's pretty much what he is.
They used to play small ball. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense. You're right.
And do we want to compare their jobs?
Yeah, I definitely think we should talk about it. I guess Walter Matthau, he's a pool cleaner?
Yep.
And Billy Bob is an exterminator. I have my theories, but why do you think they changed the job?
I just honestly think they did it just so when the kids work for him, like they're in more danger in the remake than they were in the original. Clean a pool, there might be some chemicals and stuff, and maybe a dead animal in the pool filter. But in the remake, you have the kids like playing with the chemicals and what's a carcinogen or something. And he's like, it's a liberal bullshit, which I thought was pretty funny. So I only think it was just to put the kids a little more danger, just for laughs. What's your theory with the job switch?
I was probably thinking too hard about it. I thought that maybe it felt like a more sort of like viable job for an adult.
That's true.
But maybe not.
I mean, pool cleaning service is a legitimate job. Yeah.
No, that's a legitimate job, and like you can make a lot of money, especially in like somewhere like Los Angeles. So I don't know. I think you're right. Maybe it is just for the kids because it doesn't change much about him whether he's a pool cleaner or an
No.
exterminator.
We get that
Doesn't
opening
really do.
scene in the remake where he's like just at this all American house cleaning up the rats, and he's like, "Oh, I gotta go. It's 3 o'clock. Drinking a beer at the job."
Yeah,
Gives you a small laugh in the beginning of the movie, but it doesn't really affect the plot at all. Him being an exterminator doesn't come into the training of the team or winning any games or anything.
not at all. You're
And they
right.
even they even have Billy Bob Thornton at a pool later to sort of mirror a scene that was in the original. So it's like,
Right.
well, you're just doing extra steps to
Yeah,
pull off a
you,
scene like in the original, right?
you took another step just to get that. Yeah, I mean, I appreciated the rat scene in terms of sort of what we were talking about before. You see this sort of key difference between the two characters. But Walter just kind of does his job. There's not much more to it than that. And Billy Bob, you see him, he's a rascal. This guy's,
Oh, this guy's drinking beer on the job and leaving the rats there. Whoa!
the mom's like, what are you going to do about the rats? Like, I guess you'll make another appointment. And, like you see that sort of wild streak in him very early on. And it lets you know the tone that you're going to get out of this remake, which I think where the remake sort of finds its own space and excels is in making Billy Bob more charismatic and drive a lot of the jokes, but it also makes the character make less sense based on the original script.
I get that.
I don't know, like there's a kind of a way to play with that I don't think the movie probably explored enough. There was a different way to make him kind of the shitty coach. The drinking angle, other than him like passing out and being irresponsible, didn't feel nearly as important. Kind of going back to one of our original points. I don't know whether he drank or not. Didn't seem to matter as much as in the first film, where it's like, yeah, his drinking is
It's a
it's a
problem. Yeah.
it's a problem. It really is because like it's sort of from a certain standpoint, and that's what's great about this Buttermaker character. They're both so flawed, but like it just feels like completely irresponsible in the first film, where in the other film, yes, it's irresponsible, but he's so like charismatic that I think it just feels like he's kind of like that cool uncle. He just
Yeah.
doesn't feel like as much of a threat to the children outside of having them play with carcinogens.
Yeah, the booze just makes him more fun as opposed to Walter Matthau, where the booze is, like we said, a problem.
100%.
Any other topics on Buttermaker? Or
I know at some point we're gonna have to talk about him in the context of when he kind of gets mad at the kids. I mean, not much changes between the two films.
you could bring that up now.
Yeah. Okay. Given what we're talking about, Dan, these sort of differences, are some of these beats that are the same? Are they still sort of hitting like that like championship game when he gets mad at the kids and he's yelling at them? I don't know. Is there as much weight in it in the remake for you, or how do you feel about his portrayal and how it affects some of these beats between the films?
Yeah, I guess Walter Matthau's Buttermaker gets like borderline violent at these kids. Like he's throwing shit at them, but not like directly at them, like in their direction, but he doesn't make contact. And Billy Bob's Buttermaker never gets to that extreme. Yeah, I guess it goes back to the drinking again. It's like he can be an angry drunk, and he just really unloads on these kids, and it could be a little scary. And if you're a kid watching this, you'd be like, "Wow, this fucking guy's a little nuts. This guy's a little off his rocker." But again, like Billy Bob Thornton's Buttermaker never reaches those extremes, and he's pretty level-headed. He might yell at the kids, but he never throws anything or gets like physically or shows any signs of like being physically violent.
Yeah, it just felt like the turn in the remake where I guess the way I would describe it in the original is like that sobering moment where he realizes like, holy shit, like I'm being completely inappropriate with these kids. Like
Yeah.
I'm not being a very good role model at all. And Billy Bob, I mean, it's the same thing. He obviously is upset and realizes that he's gone too far, but because I don't know, when you make him so much more interesting is not the right word, but when you make him so much more kind of capable, it didn't feel like that big of a turn because even though he's not being a great role model, he's still more or less being a decent guy. Like when you see how he's training the kids, I felt like the training started to come along and looked much more useful in the remake. Whereas like the original, yes, there's your training and stuff, but like it felt like Billy Bob kind of had it together by that point.
I get that. No, it kind of plays off what you said, like about his Buttermaker being more charismatic. And while that's great as an audience member because you're sort of rooting for him, it kind of doesn't work for the Buttermaker character, like in general, because you're not supposed to entirely root for him because he is kind of a piece of shit at times. So you're not sure about him a lot, but because Billy Bob's portrayal is just charismatic, you're pretty much on his side the whole time, and he doesn't really do anything to cross that line to make you go, okay, I don't know about this guy. But the original Buttermaker, portrayed by Matthau, like I said, he has those violent kind of bursts of rage. Then you're just like, oh, just when you're about to get on his side, he does something stupid, and you're just like, okay, backing up. I don't know about you yet. So, yeah, when he does have that turn at the end, it is more impactful in the original because you haven't been on his side the whole time, as opposed to the remake where you're pretty much on Billy Bob's side the moment he cracks that beer open at his job.
100%, because there's mischief. You know, that's the best way to put it. Like this other, the remake, Billy Bob's character is mischievous. I don't get that sort of bad guy thing going on. I think that in the context of like other coaches, sure, maybe, but like when you break it down, and we'll talk about some of the other characters later, like when, as you said in the synopsis, where the other coach gets sort of violent with his son, you know, that guy is arguably a much worse person, even though he's on paper, he should be the better role model. And, you know, both movies play with that, but like he should be the better role model. He's not. And it sort of makes Buttermaker in this remake kind of right. You know, it's like this is all a bunch of like bullshit and people who are pretending like they're decent and they're not. And it just feels like two sort of different theories of how to go about teaching children. And one's rough around the edges, one's maybe not appropriate in polite society, but it ultimately is not that bad when you look at sort of how other people are acting. Like when you're looking at people who are keeping these sort of misfits from playing baseball, like these people are the bad people. And Buttermaker, he may not fit in, but he's not. Besides the drinking, he's really he's not that bad. In the original, though, there's not that same sort of play. It's there, all that subtext is there, but he is that bad. You know, he's not great until he gets better. You know, it takes him a decent amount of the film to start to kind of come around to being a better man.
Yeah, and it takes you a decent amount of time to warm up to him, at least with Mathau's portrayal, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
Anything else, or do we want to pick our Buttermakers?
Yeah, I think we can pick our Buttermakers because I think...
it sounds like we're on the same page with this one.
Yeah, I think so. I think without talking about some of the other characters, there's not much further that we can go with the Buttermaker portrayals because there's other elements that make the two characters different and kind of show you their approaches to life, as it were.
Yeah, Mathau all the way?
Mathau, in terms of the script, for what I think the movie needs to make sense, Mathau all the way. But in terms of the comedic stuff, Billy Bob, I think, is doing a fine job with making the movie funnier, maybe in an inappropriate way, but there's a lot of quotables, there's a lot of jokes in there. But I think for the context of what the movie, I think, is supposed to be trying to say, Mathau's the better Buttermaker, by far. Agreed
on all fronts. So let's go on to other characters, and we could even talk about Buttermaker? Boilermaker? What? He has so many nicknames. All right, we could talk about him as we go on. So I guess the next character that carries a lot of weight in the films is Amanda. Amanda, the young protege that Buttermaker trained when she was young and he was dating her mother. In the original, she's portrayed by Tatum O'Neal, and in the remake, she's portrayed by Sammy Kane Kraft.
Yeah, talking about Amanda, I think this is another character where things get interesting in the two portrayals. Just offhand, before we really even get into the character, I can tell you this. I felt, and I think it's supposed to be this way, I definitely felt like the remake one is more mature. She feels older. I think she probably is older on paper, but like she felt like an older person in the remake. And not to get too weird about it, but like, I mean, she brings it up sort of more sexualized for some reason, whereas the original, she still feels like she's trying to like get older, but she still mostly feels like a little girl to me. She feels like a small child, whereas this remake feels like a teenager. She's 12.
Definitely got that vibe.
I think you get that vibe because the movie sort of says it.
Yeah, right. That's why I got the vibe.
You know, like, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, it's an interesting choice, I guess.
No, she definitely looks older, but they're about the same age. Yeah, Tatum O'Neal and the Sammy Kane
Yeah,
Craft, they're about the same age. Sammy looks a lot older, but
yeah.
they are the same age.
I think maybe part of that is times and how they've changed. I mean,
Yeah.
2005 versus 1976, there's a lot of cultural differences that would affect that. They mentioned things like the internet, and I think just, I mean, there were pop stars and stuff then, but like you think about sort of some of the pop stars that were popular in like the 2000s. I think that young women were being more engrossed in, for lack of a better word, just more of like sexualization than in 1976, where
Yeah.
she's just kind of a tomboy, and that's more or less what she's doing. Whereas this remake one wants to be, she wants to go into womanhood at maybe before she should.
Yeah,
Is
she's talking about birth control in front of Buttermaker in the remake. In general, she just looks taller than the
hmm
original. Yeah, so that
yeah,
helps her look older.
and I mean you get this between like boys and girls at that age. Her and Kelly feel older
In the remake. Yeah.
in the remake. Yes, they don't. Her and Kelly don't feel like they fit in. They just feel like maybe they're like a bit older than the rest of them because the other ones are like pure misfits. And in the original, yes, Kelly was like this cool kid, and yes, Amanda was like very capable pitcher and very independent. But they more or less felt like they were still in the same age range. And I think because the movie's sort of maybe playing with the concept of her going on dates with Kelly and this concept of her trying to be older than she is, that it makes her feel older than she is, and she almost doesn't fit in the remake with the rest of the crew.
I definitely thought she seemed a lot older than the kids, but as soon as they introduced Kelly, I was like, oh, this guy's like, was he in college or something? Like, he looks a lot older in the remake. And I guess we can kind of talk about the two characters at the same time. So I just want to
Yeah, I
say,
think,
but before we move on, that in the original, Kelly's portrayed by Jack Earl Haley, good old Rorschach there. In the remake, we have Jeffrey Davis. And yeah, Kelly and Amanda both seem older in the remake, but I thought that Kelly by far like looked more out of place than Amanda did.
yeah, he does. Definitely does. Let's start by sort of breaking down some of the differences. I would say Amanda in the original to me felt more where like you get a lot of the mischief from Buttermaker in the remake. In the original, I just felt like I liked that portrayal of Amanda. She's over there, she's selling maps of the stars. She's just kind of doing her own thing. She felt very independent, and she gave me kind of like this sort of like not quite, but like she's out there kind of like hustling. She's kind of like
Yeah.
scamming people, kind of. Like it felt. I like that portrayal. In the remake, I think they sort of talk about it, but I mean, she's really just selling vintage clothing, and whether or not it's actually vintage doesn't change much.
Mm-hmm.
I just felt like it didn't really show off her strengths to have her working that kind of like selling clothing thing versus like the being on the side of the road selling maps of the stars felt it just made her feel like she had a lot more agency in that film. I appreciated that portrayal.
Yeah. I mean, for a little 12-year-old girl to just be out on the side of the road, selling these maps to the stars all by herself, as opposed to a 12-year-old girl who's kind of like at a swap meet or something. The one that's all alone in the middle of the road. It's like, damn, the girl's got balls, man. I know
Yeah,
it's like the 70s, and maybe parents were like, yeah, go ahead, run a lemonade stand, sell a map to the stars, go and do whatever you want. And that probably wouldn't fly in 2005. It definitely makes the original Amanda just, it seems like she's got a little more guts, a little more independence there.
right, right. She's got a little more edge,
Mm-hmm.
and she really works Buttermaker over in the original. Yeah, they do kind of the same beat, but like she's like, I want ballet lessons, I want braces and all that stuff, and you actually see the ballet lessons
Mm-hmm.
where in the remake maybe they're trying to stay away from some of these sort of like more gender
Cliches. Yeah.
because like the kid I think was it Lucas or something, he's the one doing ballet and basket weaving, which is, I guess it's a fine choice, but it doesn't help the character because we don't see her actually get some of the things that she's asking for. Whereas like this Amanda knows Buttermaker needs her, and she really like it's in line with the character. It's like, all right, I'm selling things on the side of the road. Here's an opportunity. I'm taking the opportunity, and she runs with it. I like that portrayal of her.
I think she might get a little bit more to do in the original. Just jumping ahead here, when they try to recruit Kelly in the films. In the original, Kelly is at an arcade and he's playing, what's that, table hockey with just randoms and making money off of them. And then Amanda comes in and she's like she's just talking to him, but like beating Kelly, who nobody was able to beat. And then she's like, okay, if I win, and then you join the Bears, and if not, you get whatever you want. So you actually see her like kind of winning, and it's like, okay, so she's kind of a badass up there with Kelly, you know, kind of putting her on the same level. Ultimately, she loses. In the remake, you don't really get anything like that. They change it. It's not an arcade anymore. It's a skating rink. Is that what it's called? I don't want it to sound like it's kids, roller skating in a circle.
It's kind of like called Skateland, but it felt like
they have like ramps, like half pipes and stuff. You know, it's not like
a skate park almost.
Yeah, you don't really see Amanda skateboarding at all, and you don't see really Kelly skateboarding at all. You don't really see them do anything there, and then you just cut to, I wasn't able to do it, and it's like, well, I didn't even know you could do it because I didn't see anything from you. So it adds more depth to the Amanda character in the original.
I agree, because we see the original Amanda, like you said, the word that just keeps coming back to my head is a hustler. You know, like her mom is in the picture, but kind of out of the picture, you know, in both films. But like, it seems to matter more in this original film, just because, like you said, she's on the side of the road selling stuff. She's working Buttermaker over. You see her, like you said, you see her physically giving this guy some problems in table hockey. And it all fits back into her character. It all molds into this kind of quote unquote tomboy character who just has everything going on. Like, all the boys don't want her around, but she's more capable than all of them. Before you get this Kelly character. Because we're kind of talking about Kelly and Amanda at the same time. This new Kelly is just not my bag, man.
No, not at all.
I like the original.
Yeah. Like, in my notes, I just have meh every time I saw him on screen.
Yeah, like,
I mean, in all fairness, it's this kid's, what was his name? I just want to get it here. Jeffrey Davis. It was his first movie, and because of his meh portrayal, it's probably why it's his only movie he's ever been in.
This is one very obvious place. I'm saying that Amanda in the remake kind of misses the mark as well, because I think they're playing more on her wanting to be older and not enough on who she actually is. This Kelly, there's just less mystery, because I think you see less of him sort of hanging around like you see in the original. Like, the kids, there's foreshadowing. He's hanging out, smoking cigarettes. They see him. He rides off. He does his whole thing in opening day. He's on more of a motorcycle than what you're seeing in the remake, which is kind of like just like a dirt bike, you know? So, you know, first Kelly, he feels, the original, just feels like a badass.
Yeah.
You know? Who's this mystery badass making his way onto the field? The remake, I'm not getting it. I'm like, okay, he's a little scruffy. He gets into some trouble, but he doesn't feel dangerous. And I don't think you also missed the scene. He doesn't really get like detained by the cops in the remake, does he?
No, he doesn't crash his bike during opening game. He gets away scot-free, and we don't see him for a while, which is probably for the best.
It's for the best.
But just getting back into why he probably is better in the original. First of all, the age definitely comes into play here. Like, the Kelly in the original looks like he's the age of the kids in the Bears, right? And like we keep saying, the new Kelly in the remake looks like he could be in college. Like, he looks so fucking old. So like in the original, you have this like small, like 10-year-old looking kid wearing his glasses, you know, have his sleeveless shirts, on his motorcycle, hitting on women much older than him, you know, just doing what badass does. And then you have this college kid at this little league game, hitting on women, not wearing sunglasses, not smoking, not really doing anything too bad. He asked for a beer in the beginning of the remake, but he doesn't really do anything like the original Kelly does to sort of stand out to, you know, that whole badass persona that gets played up later when they're trying to recruit him. how old he looks really hurts, because okay, you're doing that, but you look so old, so of course you'd be doing these things. But like to have a little kid be doing that just is so much more impactful than some adult.
Yeah, and the introduction of him, like, I don't know, they try to make him seem more mysterious in the remake because the way when Buttermaker asks who that kid is, and all these kids have like sort of their tall tales about him. Yeah, okay, he's mysterious and sounds like he can do a lot of different things, but the visuals
Yeah,
to me
of course.
matter. Getting arrested, they mentioned him being like a loan shark in the original. Like he gives a kid a nickel, but he wants a dime back by Friday. He's tough.
Yeah.
No, he's not just like, ooh, who's that guy? It's like, yeah, here's this tough kid who doesn't take any shit. I don't think that they play into this as much as in the original, but in the remake, they also add this element of his dad's not around.
Yeah, they threw that in, which
Just
doesn't come back at all. It just felt a little heavy-handed.
unnecessary.
Yeah.
Because like, I don't know, you've got a guy who, Kelly gets a funny line out of it because he's like, oh, you think people want to see your nuts, which is a funny line, but
his only line that he gets,
seriously,
that I appreciated.
It comes out of nowhere. It sort of undermines the character because like now I want to know what's going on with his dad,
Right.
and it makes Buttermaker a bad guy again because he brings up, what do you have, daddy issues, and it just feels very forced and unnecessary. I would rather just kind of like a mystery tough kid that like people disrespect in the same way they disrespect Buttermaker because they don't think that he fits in. Mm-hmm. And when he's pushed into a corner and someone's like, nobody wants you around, he's like, oh yeah, well, I'm gonna prove you wrong. It felt more real in the original, mm-hmm. instead of this kind of forced, not even B plot, like C plot that isn't even, it's not a thing. Because in that scenario, you almost even want Buttermaker to, maybe you do a flip here. Maybe you want Buttermaker to take Kelly under his wing as opposed to Amanda, because like he's the one without a dad.
Yeah, right. He needs the father figure. But and again, just going back to like their height, like okay, you got the Yankees coach. He's picking on Kelly in the original. He's like twice his size because Kelly's so small. But he picks on Kelly in the remake. It's like they're the same height. It's like it's not as impactful. I'm sorry.
It's true. I think you're right to focus in on the physicality of the characters. He doesn't look right for the part in this remake. Old. Way too old, or portrayed way too old. Because like the Bad News Bears in both films, but in this remake, they're tiny.
They are super tiny.
These small kind of like punk kids, and you're right. Then there's this guy who just comes around who's like, you're right. He could be a character in like Dawson's Creek, or he could be, he could play college if you wanted to go that far. I think you could make that stretch. And there's no way any of these other characters, I don't even think you could have most of them play high school kids.
No, not at all.
So you're right. Like, I do find that Amanda, but more so Kelly in this remake, don't seem to fit as part of the team. But in the original, that never came. I never thought that once.
I'll give Amanda a little bit of slack in the remake because, girls hit growth spurts before boys. So you could see her being a little bit taller. And I'll give this to the Amanda in the remake too. I thought just like skills wise, like she looked like the better ball player. I mean, you could chalk that up to, well, she was actually a ball player, the actress that portrayed her. So she was a little more athletic, definitely. I got the vibe from the Amanda in the remake. But it just, in the original, has a lot more to do. So I'm going to go ahead and give the nod to that one, too. Yeah.
You can tell in the remake that she knows how to throw a baseball.
Yeah.
She really knows what she's doing. And that was a good casting choice in terms of that. Her mechanics are sound. And as impressive as it is, when you really break these films down, the baseball is secondary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
It doesn't have to look that real at all. I appreciate the fact that she can throw a baseball, but even if she couldn't and you just did more or less the same thing you did in the first movie, I think the actual character and what they're saying or doing are more important than whether or not they look like they can play baseball.
I agree. And I'm just going to say this too, like pretty much her portrayal doesn't really deviate from the originals. So if the character does pretty much the same thing that was done in the original, then I'm just going to go ahead and give the nod to the original because he didn't bring anything new. It's not necessarily the actor or actress's fault,
Nah.
but that's just the way I'm going to go. And since Amanda's pretty much point for point, except for the job thing, I'm just going to give it to the original. But Kelly, so much worse in the remake.
So
much worse. It's not even a contest. Kelly in the original all the way.
Yeah, I think to your point that some of the choices that they make, although they're minor differences, they are differences and they kind of change the character. As I mentioned before, this remake leans into Amanda wanting to be an adult, and she has some interesting kind of lines that make Billy Bob Thornton uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. I think they make anyone uncomfortable if they're having that conversation, but it's not quite the character you're looking for what you need her to do. I felt the original, maybe because it is the original, but like that portrayal sort of hits that sweet spot. She feels like a kid. I understand why she wants Buttermaker sort of back in her life. The original all the way for me in terms of Amanda. And then Kelly, it's not like there's no discussion. There was never a point where I thought that this remake, Kelly, he's so much weaker of a character that it's astounding. And again, maybe it's some of the choices, maybe it's some of the things the studios will not do with kids anymore. But I don't know. I feel like there were other movies around this era that, like, you tell me like a kid smoking cigarettes, like we've seen that before in film. Like, it just, I don't know. He didn't feel right at all. More leather jackets, less skating.
Yeah, I think a big problem is the casting. He was too old. They didn't give him anything new to do. Really forgettable. Honestly, out of all the characters in the remake, weakest character, hands down, is the Kelly.
Yeah.
You want to just go on to the other head coach, the Yankees head coach?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Okay. So for our Yankees head coaches, we have Roy Turner, portrayed by Vic Morrow in the original. And then we have Roy Bullock, portrayed by Greg Kinnear in the remake. Not sure why they changed the last name, but they did. Other than Buttermaker, this character probably has the most changes from the original to the remake.
Definitely the most changes. I think in the remake, which we see a decent amount in this remake, we're leaning more into the comedy aspect of it. And I think he plays a more lighthearted role than we see in the original film.
I also think they try to build him up more as the antagonist in the remake. I got kind of a little bit of a Dickie vibe from him in the original, but the remake really spells it out for you because they have him and Buttermaker really butting heads a lot in the remake, but they don't so much butt heads in the original.
Yeah, and the original, outside of some of the games and some of the conversations that are had, he's there, he's a character, but you're right, it's not like he's doing much to be the antagonist. It seems the problem really is how bad they are at baseball. Mm-hmm. And whereas like Vic Morrow in the original, he's there. He seems like a much more serious character. And when they do interact, it's in the context of the games. There's not a lot of cross-talk outside of that. So it felt more like the Bad News Bears had kind of their own problems. Mm-hmm. And eventually the Yankees became the problem because it's the championship game. But he's not as, like you say, he's not as present as he is in the remake, where you're right, they spell it out that this is an antagonist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you get the scene at the dinner. Roy Turner doesn't really do anything at the dinner, but in the Roy Bullock, in the remake, he gets this scene where a dad asks him, hey, I was wondering if my kid can get more playtime. He's like, yeah, sure, yeah. And then like as soon as the guy leaves, he's like, you see what I gotta deal with? So you get that pretty early on. You get signs that this guy is kind of a dick.
And you're seeing, like you said, more interactions with Buttermaker, whether it's at the softball game, as you mentioned that scene at the dinner. Like, there's more times where they're interacting, and like the grape smuggler joke when they're talking about his shorts, which seems to be a major part of the of the character. Apparently, you're getting this back and forth with the two coaches. It's just not there in the original.
Yeah, he definitely gets a lot more screen time in the remake. That's for sure. And he's given more to do overall. So I kind of appreciated that. I thought it was pretty interesting to make this guy the antagonist of the team and the head coach. I thought it was a good choice for the remake.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the remake does a good job with this character sort of driving more motivation and driving more plot.
Yeah.
The original, like I said, it's a decent character. I mean, you know why he's there. He's just as upset as everyone else is kind of having to include these kids. We didn't really talk about it, but basically, one of the Bad News Bears players' parents sued the league so that there would be this other team with the Misfits that we're seeing. And, you know, the Roys, the head coaches in both films, both don't appreciate that. But there's clearly more going on under the surface in the remake that you're just not getting in the original.
But the original Roy definitely has a violent moment that the remake Roy doesn't. So I'm going to go there. In the final game, the son, Joey, in both films is the pitcher for the Yankees, and he's just not throwing right, and he almost takes out one of the Bears players. You know, just a high beanball almost took the player's head off. And then Roy just goes out there and just berates Joey in front of everybody in the middle of the game. And in the original, you get a slap, and in the remake, you just get a little bit of verbal berating and maybe getting too close and accidentally knocking him over and pushing him.
Yeah, I understand why the film doesn't want a grown man to hit a kid. I understand it. It weakens the scene. There's not as much. I don't know. It's not as visceral in this remake because like he feels more right in the remake, although he pushes the kid, which isn't okay. That does feel a little more accidental and doesn't seem like his intention was to harm his son. Like I said, you can't hit the kid, so you gotta pull back there. But his wife's reaction doesn't feel as important. Like he doesn't feel as bad of a moment for Roy than in the original because you know he pushes the kid. He goes to the sideline. His wife's like, I'm taking him home after this. And, you know, they kind of just cross their arms and they're upset at each other. But in a way, I mean, the push is bad, but, like, he's kind of right. You know, there wasn't a lot of moments that made you feel like he pushed his son into doing that. That was his son having his own sort of interactions with that kid throughout the film. Whereas in the original, I thought it was very powerful to have the punch, or excuse me, the slap, which is pretty intense. You can tell why the wife reacts like that. And she even throws in a line that says, you know why he threw that. Because he gave him instructions to throw the ball away. But, like, obviously it gets thrown at the Bad News Bears player. But the wife has this great line that's just like, you know, after Roy says, I told him to do something else. He's like, you know why he threw that ball. And then she takes him away immediately. It just felt more powerful in the original. And it felt like a clear turning point for that character. Whereas in the remake, it's a scene, it's intense, definitely not the right thing to do there, but it doesn't feel kind of like in-game game changers, like, oh, that guy shouldn't have done that. I don't know, he didn't hit a point where anyone's really protesting, which you would expect more in a more modern film. Like, they had to stay in this lane that actually sort of weakens the moment.
I know it was more impactful in the original, but I think the remake kind of went the right way because, you know, maybe in the 70s, a little more common practice to be hitting your kids a little bit. Maybe the ball game would go if that happened in real life. But I just feel like if you hit a kid in 2005, it's over. The game's over. You're not going to finish that. If the head coach beating the pitcher, that's game over, man. So while it's not as impactful, I think it's a good idea that the remake did that. I mean, remember there was a TV show called The Slap? Like a whole series based on a guy slapping a kid in the background. They made a whole show about that. I mean, hitting kids is so not okay, especially in the eyes of Hollywood. So, I mean, I'm not saying it's okay either. Don't get me wrong either. But I definitely think they went the right route. And I could understand Joey being upset. I mean, he's still getting humiliated in front of all these people. So that's reason to throw the game. And I think Joey's reaction makes more sense in the remake to kind of throw an underhand pitch as opposed to just holding the ball and kind of grinning. That kind of diminished the moment for me because like now he's just like smirking and like holding on to the ball. It was less believable than him just kind of throwing it underhand. Yeah, I'm gonna go with the remake not doing the slap because I don't think they would allow the game to go on if you have a head coach just slapping players. For 2005, at least. I
agree. The slap, I think, is too much, especially for my audience. Even for that film then, it's a bit much.
I was shocked. I was like, they're going to still play? Oh, my God.
I guess it's one of those things like, let the parents parent.
Yeah, it was the 70s. You know, it might have been okay back then. A lot of things that they did in that 70s film might have been okay back then, but we'll get to that later.
Oh yeah, I think even the slap moment that we're talking about probably influenced kind of our next subject. Like you mentioned, we'll talk about some of the stuff. I do miss the line from the mom. I wish that you could have the exact same scene. I do wish that that line was still there because to me, it was an important line about how we got to that point. How we got to the point where we're pushing, slapping, whatever we're doing to the kids. This is not a bubble. The dad was sort of like maintaining his innocence there, which I think maybe the studio is going for, or the script was modified to sort of make it, yes, he did push a kid, but his son shouldn't be throwing a ball because that could hurt someone. And they're really focusing on kids getting hurt there in a scene where an adult is potentially hurting a kid, which is a weird dynamic, but it's there. I just like that line where it's like, you know why he threw that ball. That one line shows you who Roy is. He may look like the good guy. He may be doing all the right things on paper, but he's also a bad role model. That's there, and I miss that one little line. I think that scene would have worked more for me because the reaction from the mom, yeah, she's taking the kid home and everything, and yes, it does feel more realistic the way he tries to throw the game, but I think there's a humanizing element to the way it's sort of portrayed that I'm missing a little bit. But overall, it's one-to-one. I think, like you said, it's a good idea not to hit kids. So they get to lean in that way. It feels more realistic. So to that point, I feel like Roy, I'm giving the nod to Roy in the remake because he has more to do. He's funny. He does have that bad moment, but it doesn't take him out of the equation in terms of like the game or being able to coach. Whereas in the original, Roy isn't there much, and when he is there, man, that's fucked up.
Yeah, I agree with you. You just give him more to do. You give him more jokes. That's a better character right there. So yeah, I'm gonna go with the Roy in the remake as well.
And you know what? I was just thinking this because I wasn't really thinking about this before, but he's violent with Kelly in the original in a way that he's not in the remake.
That's true.
He's much more forceful with this random kid. He may say something shitty in the remake, but he's not violent in general towards children. So that's a big change. That is a good change. Yeah,
that's a good change. That for sure. Do we want to just move on to some of the other bears and talk about some of the differences there? These are the last of our character comparisons.
Yeah, I think once we sort of round out these other characters, it'll make a lot of sense when we start talking about content and ratings. So let's kind of finish out our discussion of the Bad News Bears, the players themselves.
Yeah, we can talk Tanner. Tanner, the short blonde in both films with the Napoleon complex. He's pretty much the same in both films. And I said this before, and when your character's pretty much the same, I'm just going to give the nod to the original because you didn't really do anything new.
Yeah. Tanner, like you say, he's got that little Napoleon complex. He gets into scraps and fights all the time. Like, really, there's nowhere I can think of where I could point to any huge changes in behavior or character.
He's got a bigger mouth than the original, that's for sure.
Yeah.
We'll get to that. But he almost looks the same, too. It's like, is that the same actor?
No, the casting on this is pretty damn good. He looks exactly like the original character. He acts a lot like the original character. I do like you mentioned maybe before we started the podcast, but I did like the way that Tanner talked in the original. It was interesting.
Yeah, I kept all week. I kept saying this like, "Go back to your beers, Buttermaker." I kept saying that all week. Yeah. Go back to your beers. Get out of here. Get out. He's got this fucking accent. I love it. Yeah, it's great, man.
He's a lot of fun. So yeah, I definitely see the lean in that direction. You get almost an equivalent scene where Lupus is getting picked on by some other characters that are from a different team, probably the Yankees.
It was the Yankees.
So you had these Yankees players that were picking on Lupus, and Tanner, who, like you said, is not a big kid, comes out and
he hates Lupus because Lupus sucks and cost them a game too, but he'll still defend a teammate.
So you see that loyalty, you see that dynamic. It doesn't really matter how it goes down, whether someone puts ketchup in your hat or I guess shakes the porta potty that you're in. It doesn't really change much that Tanner sticks up for his teammate and gets stuffed into a trash can. Well, that he doesn't get stuffed in the trash can. He throws a trash can in the remake and then gets thrown in the mud.
Yeah.
Um,
Small little
but
twist on it.
small details. Like you said, because they're so similar, I don't have a lot to say about the character other than that I think it's still a very strong character.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'm leaning towards the original one because of the way he talks and
Yeah.
like you said, if you're not going to change the character, then the character was better in the original.
Yeah. But, the actor that portrayed him did a good enough job that I'm not shitting on him like the
Oh, yeah,
guy that
not,
did the Kelly,
no, that actor did his job.
Yeah, yeah. He was good, loud, abrasive, and everything. He did a fine job, but that original.
Yeah, can't beat it.
Yeah, yeah.
Can't beat it.
Now you want to talk about Lupus? You had mentioned Lupus in the Tanner
Yeah.
description.
Lupus.
Lupus looks a little different. We got a blonde Lupus in the original and a brown-haired Lupus in the remake.
Yeah, I mean they're distinguishable, but like Lupus kind of looks a little bit like Tanner,
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Especially in the
and,
original because they're both blonde and they have the same length hair.
yeah, if you're not paying enough attention, you could definitely mix up the characters by glance. Of course, not by actions, but
Especially in the original because you have Tanner, Lupus, and who's the original kid that the dad hired Buttermaker? Like his kids also has long blonde hair.
oh yeah,
There's
yeah.
3 white long blonde haired kids and they all kind of look the same.
I definitely got a little lost at times with who was doing what in the original. Mostly in the scenes where they're actually playing baseball, not when anyone's talking. You can tell. But,
Oh, yeah, because that Tan has got that accent.
it's got that voice, Buttermaker.
Go back to your beers.
It's so good. I love that line. Lupus feels like he's got more of a problem in the remake. I don't know. Like not a problem. He seems
Maybe special needs or something. Is that what you're going with that?
yeah. Not to be offensive or anything, but like he felt like he was more on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have that line where he says that like bird poo tastes like candy.
Right. They do have
Like,
that line.
I don't think I need that line, and it's not very funny, but okay. It just felt like this remake, and since we are talking about these characters, they're really leaning into the tropes of these characters. Like you got the black kid, you got the kid in the wheelchair, you got the fat kid. It's all there in the original, but it seems to be more of like their character traits in the remake. And we will talk about this at some point, but I don't know. I don't think that the movie really says the right things about people that are different. Like the original.
Oh, not at all.
There may be like slurs in the original, but like we will talk about this. But I felt that the original actually handles these subject matters somehow better. And I don't know, like Lupus, I don't know why they made him so like special needs. It didn't feel appropriate to me because I don't think it furthered the plot in any meaningful way. And you just kind of like open yourself up to having this strangeness. Like it's not a great joke, the bird poop thing. And I think it's punching down a little too much.
I didn't really take it as special needs. I didn't find it like that. He's a booger eater in the original. I feel like you got to top it in the remake. So bird poop eater. That's all I took it as.
Okay.
Honestly, I didn't think they were trying to say anything specifically or have him portray any type of people. I just thought this is a weird guy.
Yeah.
He eats boogers. He also eats other weird shit. It's a lupus. His name sounds like a disease.
Yeah.
The name is a disease. Isn't lupus a disease?
It is a disease.
Okay, yeah.
House.
What's that?
It's the joke in House. It's always lupus.
Oh, okay.
It's never lupus.
I just know George Costanza one time he's like, "Is it lupus? Is it lupus?" When he thought he had like something. That's my exposure to lupus.
In the show House, there's this running joke about it, and one or two times, it actually is lupus, but
I see.
it's like something they always throw out like as a potential. Sickness.
Yeah, so he's named after a disease. He eats shit that he shouldn't eat. He's a weird kid. Again, it's kind of one of those portrayals in the remake that doesn't really deviate at all from what was done in the original. He even kind of gets a less heroic moment because he kind of has to share it.
Undercut.
Yeah, he was supposed to save the day because he saves the day in the original. He gets the final out on his team, but he doesn't get the final out. He actually loses the ball, and wheelchair kid has to save the day.
Hooper.
Matt Hooper, I think, is his name.
Yeah. I kind of I get why they made the change, and okay, it's always interesting when there's somewhat of a twist that makes the movies distinct from each other. But I don't know, like there's no progress for him.
Yeah, he doesn't get like that arc that he had in the original. Like this kid that really just sucked, nobody wanted him at all, but he gets this kind of almost a game saving out, you know?
Yeah, even though like they're getting crushed at that point,
Hmm.
and at this point it makes the film work. I guess the big spoiler is that they don't win. It feels better in the original because Lupus is so kind of like downtrodden, and he gets his big moment, and that moment feels like the win. Like the way they're celebrating there feels like very impactful and very special for the team. And it's sort of undercut by a character who, yes, he's in a wheelchair, but he doesn't have like the same problems. He actually,
Yeah.
Hooper is actually pretty funny as an addition that wasn't there before. He's distinct and he's able to take care of himself. Like, yeah, he's sickly, I guess, but doesn't stop him from being able to do a lot of things that everyone else does. So taking that away from Lupus and giving it to Hooper feels like a gimme because you put the character in a wheelchair. Whereas like I missed the Lupus arc because I think it kind of solidifies one of the bigger points of the film. Like once Buttermaker is like, oh, let everyone play,
Hmm.
it allows Lupus to have that arc, and I think it's important that he gets that catch.
Yeah, he does because, recalling back the second game, or no, sorry, the third game, once Amanda's the pitcher, they lose by 1 run because Lupus, he couldn't catch the ball, he couldn't throw the ball. The whole reason the Bears lost was because of him. And now here he is having his moment of redemption, and that's
Right.
taken away from him completely in the remake.
Completely just for a twist
Yeah.
that doesn't do anything.
It doesn't really pay off.
It's a twist for twist's sake,
Exactly, yeah.
which is a little strange for this movie because it more or less doesn't deviate. And they take this one moment to sort of change it because you introduce this other character, which I don't mind that they introduce another character because he does have some good lines.
Always
but
my
like,
favorite of the new characters.
oh, for sure, of the new characters.
I am in a wheelchair. It's like, damn, keep saying it, kid. It's cracking me up.
The cancer of the eye thing, but it turns
Yeah.
out hilarious stuff. It's pretty funny.
But it
Again,
takes away from other characters. That's the problem with it.
yeah, and I always do feel like I'm kind of jumping on this, but like this movie, in terms of I guess quote unquote diversity, feels like there's more types of characters in the film, but I don't think they're saying great things about these people, and that's something that we'll talk about in a moment. For lack of a better term, should we talk about the black kids?
Sure.
The characters Ahmed Abdul Rahim in both films, not a huge deviation. I think in the remake he does get a bigger moment. I don't have really a lot to say about him in the original other than like he
gets hit in the balls.
he's in the balls. That's true. And he like fanboys about, ball players. I think it's
Hank Aaron in the original.
so yeah, he gets the fanboy about Hank Aaron quite a bit. And I thought that it was funny, not just him getting hit in the balls, but I thought that it was a funny line early in the remake where we're kind of learning who the different characters are. He's wearing like a certain number. He's like, oh, is that Satchel Paige? Is that Willie Mays? And he's like, no, it's Mark McGuire. And it's such a weird line, but it's like, but he's a white.
Yeah, I had a good laugh at that line.
I didn't expect that. Again,
I mean, you
I
expect your Buttermaker to kind of be saying stupid shit like that, so I went with it.
no, absolutely. I went with it too. Like I said, I don't really have a lot to say about Ahmed in the films, other than, like you said, you get getting hit in the balls in the original, and you get him actually throwing a punch at somebody in the remake, which is cool little addition, I guess. But that one line that Buttermaker throws out there makes it worth it for me in the remake because he gets to you get to see tone for another character. So not really saying much about the character we're talking about, but he does help kind of frame the Buttermaker in the remake, which I appreciate. I think that some of the things that happen, what prompts the punch, are interesting. I don't know. Like I'm actually leaning towards his remake character because he does more, and he gets to throw a punch and you get a funny joke out of him. I just wanted to bring him up mostly because of that. I like the backdrop of that character, and I think it matters for tone in the two films.
But he does have one extra scene in the original. After the bears first loss, he kind of gets really upset and kind of takes off his uniform, goes up a tree, and he has the heart-to-heart with Buttermaker up there about how I was gonna say Aaron Rodgers, Hank Aaron also had that problem when he was a rookie, and that scene's completely gone in the remake because he has the scene with the Armenian kid instead. Any thoughts about why they had to replace Ahmed there? Or
I think because they have created this, because they have this Armenian character now, and there's a lot of back and forth between him and Buttermaker that happens in the remake. I just think that they were playing into the fact that they created this arc with the Armenian character. Mm-hmm. I think it's a very good scene in the original when they're in the tree and he's talking about Hank Aaron. It gives a chance for Buttermaker to start to show some of the good qualities that he has. You start to kind of see that turn there, and I like that scene, and I like what he has to say about a famous ball player. It fits very well. The heart-to-heart with the Armenian kid, I think, gets undercut by some of the advice that he's getting. The advice in general is pretty bad.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's not the best advice. It's like just lie, pretty much, is the advice.
Yeah.
As opposed to the original, he not only tries to make him feel better about Hank Aaron's poor performance as a kid, but he also gives him advice like, I think you're really fast and you should just bunt the ball as you bat lefty, give you a few extra feet there, and then you could just get to first base. And you do see Ahmed do that at the final game. Yeah. So I thought that was a nice little arc that he doesn't have. He doesn't get to have in the remake because he never has that heart-to-heart with Buttermaker. Instead, the Armenian kid, Prem Lahiri, kind of gets an arc because he tells him, you gotta lie to your parents. And then at the end of the movie, he goes, I told them we won. So there's kind of that arc, but it's kind of a shitty arc because you're just teaching a kid to lie. But I guess it kind of works because it's Buttermaker. He's not necessarily the best role model. So that was okay. But, you took away a cool moment from Ahmed there. Ahmad, not Ahmed. Ahmad.
Oh, yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, Ahmad, taking that out, it changes things. It definitely changes things. I would say that the heart-to-heart with Prem is pretty inappropriate. Not just the lying thing, but like some of his examples of lying. Oh, she said she was 18. Like, it starts to get
a
little strange with that character, knowing the type of womanizer that he is in the remake. I think it starts to kind of shine a little too bright of a light onto his behavior, being sort of like a bad role model, which never really changes throughout the film, which is, I think, kind of what we were saying before about Buttermaker. There's not really a lesson that he learns other than to be like, to dial it back a little bit in front of kids. Like, that's kind of it. And I guess to be sort of maybe in Amanda's life for some reason that makes less sense in the remake because he's dating all these other people. It never feels like he's going to like get back with the mom at all, which I think it feels like there's an opening for that in the original.
Definitely.
I don't know, like these little changes, which I think come from introducing new characters and different types of people, adding diversity to the film. Mm-hmm. You're taking away subtraction from certain characters, actually subtracts from the overall message. I think a lot of what makes the original work gets pulled out in these little moments like that.
I appreciate the diversity in the original. I thought it was pretty impressive that they had two Spanish kids that didn't speak English. It was like, oh, wow, that's pretty good for 1970, But they definitely had more diversity in the remake, and I appreciate it. But like you said, because you introduced a few new characters, now you're kind of taking away from some of the original characters. It's a fine balancing act, and they didn't quite pull it off in the remake, but I still appreciate what they were trying to do.
I agree. I appreciate what they're trying to do. I think what kind of gets me, I think we can, because we can always break down more characters, but I think this kind of brings us to sort of the one of the notes that you have here about not politically correct versus politically correct. Like you said, I like that we mentioned diversity, and there's something to be said. Like you said, the original film, there is a decent amount of diversity right there. This remake goes further, and we get past just like racial diversity, but we talk about different, like ableism and stuff like that comes into play, which is an interesting dynamic. But when we're talking about sort of like a PC film versus a non-PC film, I think there's some huge flaws with this remake when it comes to messaging, because it feels like they're trying to say more, and I feel like somehow the movie feels less appropriate than the older film, which I thought was fascinating.
Interesting. I guess I could see that, but do you want to maybe go into a little more detail about that?
Sure, let's just jump into it. There is a racial undertone in the original film when Amanda gets introduced. I believe it is Tanner that has the line.
Even
Uh,
before that, he has a line during the first practice.
yes, you're right. About the misfits. You got it written down.
I did write it down. Let me find it. I'm not gonna obviously say
I'll
a
say.
lot of the word. No, don't. You have to say the word.
I,
Just
I'll,
okay.
I'll say it, I
It's
guess. But
don't say the word. Just
okay.
what he says. I wrote down this. This is my notes exactly. Holy shit, the mouth on this kid. So he wrote Jews, not terrible to say. He says an S word about
Yep.
Spanish people. He says an N word. I don't need to go into that.
Sure.
Pansies and a booger eating moron. He says all that. And then the sort of nerdy kid comes at him. He's like, hey, you better watch it, seeing as how you're not a Jew, S word, N word, pansy, and a bugger eating moron. So he's got a bit of a mouth on him in the beginning of that original film.
He's got a bit of a mouth on him, and that line that he throws out there sort of framed for me kind of why they're not included in the baseball. It's like goes beyond them just being misfits. Let's just put it out there. There's actual racism involved. There's anti-Semitism involved. I guess homophobia.
Yeah, homophobia too.
Yeah, I mean it's all there. I was you can't really diminish the impact that's there. It makes them being included in the league feel a little more important to me because it seems like there are these sort of cultural barriers that are stopping these kids from being involved the same way. Let's just put it all the white guys get to. It's not just misfits in this case. It's these aren't the right types of people for this type of league, which is an interesting dynamic that isn't quite there in the remake because you don't have the slurs in the remake. However, the remake includes all these people and spends most of its time making fun of them, which I found to be a little strange because I never really got that turn where it felt like the messaging, sort of you would expect from like a more politically correct film. You would expect there to be some kind of turn where it's like, some people think like this, but that's not the way it is. Like, it's never really said out loud. There's a lot of things said about Armenians. There's things said about black people, Mexican people. Like, again, the Mexican lines to me in the remake feel more racist because they talk about pinatas and stuff like it. One of them is like the landscaper's kids. It was like
Yeah.
that wasn't in the original. Like some of the race jokes they make don't change. Like they don't stop being racial, so it never felt like right. So that was a problem that I had with Buttermaker, and not just Buttermaker, but other characters. But that was a problem that I had in the remake where you have all this inclusion, but you're not doing anything inclusive. Maybe just by banding together and being a team, that's enough. But like, I think they're just making so many jokes about different people's backgrounds that I don't know. I would want a little bit more from my Buttermaker by the end to make it feel like, hey, you know what? We may not get along or something like that, but I'm not racist. Like there was never that.
But I'm not racist. That's
It was
funny.
never that moment.
Yeah, you do kind of get that moment in the original, I guess, when he's up in the tree with Ahmad. Yeah,
Yeah.
when Buttermaker's up in the tree with Ahmad, Ahmad goes like, "Don't give me none of that honky shit." He's like, "Oh, no need to bring race into this." I thought that was funny. It's like
That was a funny line.
honky is like it's such a stupid. It's like barely racist calling somebody honky.
I think we talked about this a little bit earlier. Like for instance, like the line about Ahmad liking Mark McGuire. I thought that was a funny twist, and I think if they would have stayed in that space, it would have been okay. It was like, oh, he's not white, like that. That's still really funny, and I get that like there's more to this guy than just quote unquote being a black kid. But then to like then throw in like the Oreo line out of nowhere, there should have been more beats that kind of helped that along. Because like you had that one moment, and then towards the end of the film, he brings it back up. But like there's no other distinguishing reasons why that would have happened, and it just felt sort of like I I kept kind of thinking of this, like it felt kind of like punching down a little bit. I don't have a problem with a film being quote unquote not politically correct. Like I don't have a problem with that, but for what I think the point of the movie, especially the original, was, I felt like they kind of missed the point of the original film.
Yeah, they might have been just so focused on just trying to make jokes. I'll give it to this for the remake. The number of jokes, like the ratio of jokes per minute or something, definitely much higher in the remake. So they might have been punching down to get some of those jokes, to make some of those racial references. Yeah, so I honestly think that's why they did it, just to up the number of jokes in the movie.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And trust me, I found a lot of it to be funny. You know what I mean? Like I found that sure, if you're gonna make bold sort of jokes like that, jokes that you'd probably have a little bit of trouble with today if you tried to do this again in the same manner. I think that because of, as we like to call it, outrage culture is out there. I think that sometimes just hearing these things sort of triggers people and makes them pull back. And I think that there was an opportunity for the film to still make those jokes and then have that turn that made it all right. You know, I never quite got that, and that's why, like, as I was watching, I was like, yeah, this is funny, and inappropriate, but okay, I get where the jokes are coming from. I don't know, they had to rein it back in a little bit by the end, where it's like, if he had a simple line, it was like, they don't want you playing because you're black, you're in a wheelchair. Like if he had some mini speech like that, I think you could have turned all that around, and you're never going to please everybody, but I think they could have made it work.
But they never like have a moment like that in the original.
They don't. But like even I don't know, because Buttermaker is not making the race jokes. There really aren't race jokes in the original. Other like yeah, they say racial slurs, but I think it's just kind of like a sign of what they're up against. And
I almost felt like it was like maybe a sign of the times. Like maybe people just talked like that fucking back then.
For sure. I mean, definitely sign of the times. And like kind of one of the reasons why, once you start to kind of zoom out a little bit and think outside of like the comedic aspect, which I think the film tries to do a little bit of, because I was like doing some research, and the screenwriter from like polio or something like that, he had like braces and he used to play in like a little league team, but he had a physical disability, and it sort of flavored his writing in this film. And I think that for me, that kind of shone through, that like all these people are kind of getting picked on, but they kind of have their day.
The writer for the original or the remake?
The original.
Okay.
I forget the gentleman's name, but he's the son of a fairly famous actor, and he was in a little league apparently. You may have to fact check me, or the audience can fact check me on this, but he was in a little league and he had like leg braces, and he kind of drew on that when he did this the screenplay. There's not like a moment where they like address the race aspect, but like it's not as pronounced. There's those two lines that Tanner throws out, and it gives you some backdrop of what they're up against, and it kind of makes the lawsuit, I think is where I was about to get at, it makes the lawsuit sort of make sense. When like you zoom out, you're like, oh, they're like, this town is full of basically racist people that don't want these types of people playing baseball with them. So someone like took a stand, I guess, and the town is fighting back against the lawsuit, but like it seems necessary here if that's the way this town's operating. So like it made it all kind of like fit and make sense. It made the big picture make sense for me, and I found the arc to be a little more satisfying, even though they don't like go on and say racism is bad. They don't really have to. They're showing that these kids can like make it on their own. But when you make the head coach saying most of the racist things in the film, and for him to not really turn, I just thought that it was a missed opportunity, because like Buttermaker is likable. Billy Bob Thornton is likable. He's doing some very questionable things, but I wish that he had a moment in the film to sort of turn that on his head. And I think where they try to make that happen, they don't go far enough to try to turn it on his head. Like his conversation with the Armenian guy is bad advice. And yes, he's helping a kid of a different origin or something like that, but like it's not, there's not enough there, I think.
I don't know. Like, I didn't get the vibe that like these kids weren't on a team. I don't think it had anything to do with like race or religion or anything. I just thought like because I think the Roy, the head of the Yankees, says like, look, in this league we have certain caliber of players, and these kids just stink. And then he's like, you know, he sued this specific league on purpose because he knows what being in this league means. So that's how I interpreted it. That they got sued just because they didn't want bad kids to play baseball. I didn't think it had anything really.
Are you saying in the original or the remake or both?
This specifically, I'm getting from the original.
Okay. The only place I'm kind of getting that is sort of the context clues of what Tanner's saying. Like, because it is a pretty unique and kind of intense line that he throws out twice. And I think I've been doing this a lot with some of the films lately, but I've been kind of like reading sort of into that. And I don't know if that's just like an instinct that I have when I'm watching films. Maybe I'm trying to get more out of movies than are actually there. But like I felt that line made it feel like that was a factor.
I didn't interpret it like that. I just thought like this kid just being edgy, he's a bad seed, just saying whatever the fuck he wants, and you know, some racial slurs in there. But yeah. I thought it was just, you know, these are just the worst kids and nobody wants them. And I know Billy Bob, obviously not PC shit he was saying, but I didn't really interpret it so much as like racist as like he's just feeding into stereotypes because he's just, again, it's just that ignorance of the character. You know, right. Kind of like the lovable racist, lovable, you know, stereotype guy, almost like an Archie Bunker kind of a guy going on there. Yeah, I didn't like take it to heart. Like this guy's fucking racist. Like I know he's gonna say a lot of shit that's not PC, but that's kind of like in the Buttermaker's MO. So I didn't really think that it needed to have sort of a resolution at the end, like, hey, by the way, guys, right? We're all the same. I didn't think it needed that, so I guess I was a little more lenient with it.
That's fair. I think that there's something to that. I definitely get what you're saying in terms of that's just kind of who the character is. And again, there's probably a bit from my viewing of crosstalk between the two films, sort of analyzing them both sort of in conjunction as opposed to as their own individual thing. I think what's really happening here is that I'm seeing differences between the two Buttermakers in the way that they're acting, which is very apparent. We've mentioned that. And I think also taking a line from the first film that is, I mean, part of the reason why your teacher didn't want you to watch the film were some of the swearing, but that line's a pretty heavy line for a kid to throw out. And maybe from there I started interpreting that there was more at play here. Like you mentioned, it doesn't really seem like it on the surface, like you're saying that. Like it just feels like these kids aren't good at baseball, and I think that's there. I felt like there's a way to watch the film where there's a bigger message, but maybe it's not quite there. But like to me, it felt a little bit more substantial what they were trying to do in that original film, and maybe again, like you said, sign of the times. Maybe that's part of it, you know, that people have these types of views, but like, look what these kids can do, you know. Maybe, again, I don't know if I'm supposed to pick up on that, but that's maybe an interpretation that I'm having with the film. In the remake, like I said, I have no problem with Billy Bob's portrayal. I just found it interesting because I don't know in our current climate if you could do this again.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying, and yeah, I could see viewing the movie that way, but yeah, I just didn't view it that way. I'll say it again. It was just, I thought it was just a sign of the times. This is just how some people talked back then, and then like you want this Tanner kid to be the tough one, so he's talking down to everybody on his team, so he's gonna say out like the fucking nastiest thing he could say, just to I guess defend Billy Bob's behavior. Like I almost feel like there was definitely more of a PC agenda around the time of the remake than there was the time of the original film. So I feel like his sort of the stereotypes and semi-racist shit he was saying was just like pushing against that because there wasn't necessarily a PC agenda for the original to push against, but it was easier for the remake to kind of lean on that because it did exist by the time that movie was made.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was okay with it overall.
Yeah, and I think you're right that that is there. Like the parent that sues in the remake is the mom, and she's kind of like a helicopter mom. You don't really get that in the original. it's like, yeah, he wants his kid to play baseball, but he's pretty much out of the picture after that, besides like a scene or two. But like the mom is like clearly almost like a caricature of that type of person with an agenda. The type of person that would sue or like do things because they feel like there's not enough kind of inclusion. And, she overdoes it. Yeah. At least that's what the movie is trying to say, like with the basket weaving in the ballet. And she doesn't let the kid just be a kid because she has her own agenda about what the right things are for kids in general, not just her own kid. Mm-hmm. And it's a line, like you mentioned, that Buttermaker says where it's like, she's like, oh, you tell me how to raise my kid? He's like, no, I'm not, but someone should. Pretty damn good line there. The pushback against the liberal agenda, like the carcinogen joke, that, mm-hmm. like, yeah, I think that you're right that this movie, rightfully so in a lot of ways, pushes back against this sort of like participation trophy culture that is sort of like really part of our national discussion right now. It mm-hmm. seems to be there's we've kind of hit like a crossroads where those two sides of the argument are even more pronounced today than they even were at that time.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
That was kind of like the beginning of the wave, if you want to look at it sort of in that way, where like we're starting to trend towards what we're seeing today. Mm-hmm. It's two different schools of thought, but like I found that to be interesting. Again, maybe watching both films and thinking about those different subjects is sort of flavoring my viewing. So I think that I definitely get what you're saying, where you're coming from. And I think that I could be blending topics because you have a film that's steeped in a different culture and a film that's sort of talking about a more recent culture. And there is this cross-play of race, gender, abilities, sexuality. That's like, it's not really major parts of these films, but it's there. It's in the background.
Yeah, it's sprinkled throughout the films, definitely.
I think I'm bringing some of it into the foreground, really because I'm watching both films kind of at the same not at the same time, but like I'm using the comparison. I think it's maybe putting things into films that aren't really there on an independent level.
Fair enough, Reggie.
I don't know. It's a fun, stupid movie about kids playing baseball.
Yeah, we don't gotta get too crazy.
Sometimes people are landscapers and Armenians,
This is two episodes in a row. We had to take deep dives into race.
Yeah. I'm gonna try to stay away from that, Dan, in general.
That's fair. Fair enough.
It is interesting for us is with this podcast. Like I think that what makes our podcast work is that we're not always on the same page with things, which is a good thing. That like you're seeing things and you're showing me different aspects of films, and I'm doing the same thing. And I think that for the audience, not to get too meta and break the fourth wall, I think it's important for different opinions about films because I think we can learn a lot about what we're seeing when we have multiple conversations about these things. And that's me off the soapbox now.
Okay, I will say that Oreo line was fucked up. I was like, what the fuck?
It was fucked up. and kind of like, I'm going back in, Dan. No, well, like, which I thought was interesting because, like, sort of the story of that guy writing the original screenplay kind of based on his own experiences. Like you said, it's not necessarily a term that you've heard, but I've definitely heard the Oreo term before, and I definitely heard it thrown in my direction, which, again, that's going to flavor the way I'm watching the film in a way that's not necessarily going to resonate with other people,
Yeah.
So, again, like I said, I'm not butthurt and I'm not going to go cry or, like, talk about safe spaces or anything like that. But, that's an interesting dynamic, and that's a way to sort of filter the films if you want to. But, like you said, in general, you probably don't want to because they're supposed to be kind of dumb comedies with a little bit of heart.
Yeah. These are kids' films. They're kids' films.
But are they? Because I know you had that PG versus PG-13 system in play.
Yes.
Tonally, right? Like, in tone, in terms of subject matter, these are children's films.
Yeah.
And yet they have the mouths of sailors.
Especially that original. Yeah, I don't know how many PG movies that drop the N-word several times.
Yeah. Or, like, have a kid getting the shit wailed out of them.
So the original was rated PG. The remake was rated PG-13. Like I said, the remake had to have non-alcoholic beers on the baseball field in order to be PG-13, even though the original was allowed to have beers, or supposed beers. That's what the characters were calling it in the original. Yeah, so there again, this is, the That's that PC culture just fighting fighting these movies, fighting the remake more than it did the original.
Absolutely.
You can't even call it a beer. It's like, obviously it wouldn't be a beer. It'd be like whatever looked like a beer, but you just couldn't even call it a beer. I think that's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, like, they might as well not even drink beers. It's obviously more impactful at the end. It fits the name of the movie. It fits.
Yeah.
We saw, it's like, look at these crazy kids drinking beers and spraying them at people, like doing their own thing. Take your trophy and shove it up your ass. It feels more rebellious. It feels real.
Feels perfect.
When it's actually beer. It's hilarious. A bunch of kids drinking Coors Light after, like,
after losing a game,
Yeah, it fits.
Yeah.
The non-alcoholic beers, because they even have to throw in a line. It's like, oh, what's the point? It's not even beer. And it's like, now I'm thinking it. Yeah, what is the point? They might as well not be drinking beers. They could have done something else. Like, if they drank sodas, it would have been the same thing. The impact is blunted because I'm sure, like you said, there's a studio reason. There's probably a union reason why they can't drink beer. But are they really the bad news bears if they're not drinking beers at the end of the game?
They're not drinking beers. They're not smoking cigarettes. I don't know this team, Reggie.
These are not the bad news bears that I grew up with.
Yeah, these are the so-so bears, the play it safe bears.
A lot of CGI baseballs in there.
Yes, a lot of those.
Besides the big sort of line, which, not to focus too much on it, they're swearing throughout the original film, but I can see this being PG. Like, I wouldn't be too worried about my kids going to see it. Maybe a school teacher doesn't want to get in trouble.
At a Catholic school at that, Reggie.
Yeah, I could see that. Like, if I had a kid and we were watching the film, I wouldn't be like, you can't watch this. There's too many swears. I'd be like, yeah, that's the movie. Like,
You're still going to learn a lesson at the end. Don't worry.
Exactly. You're going to swear at some point. Whereas the remake, I might have to pick my spots, Maybe that it is for an older audience because, like, there's a lot of pretty out there lines, which I think are funny. I love the sort of jokes per minute aspect of the remake. As I said before, I think some of the points get missed while they're making the jokes, but they're fun jokes.
Yeah, definitely.
The grape smugglers, you think people want to see your nuts. Some people may be offended by it, but like the pinata stuff, the Texan stuff, the Armenian stuff, like all these punchy jokes. Billy Bob's great, by the way. It's very funny. He may not be the Buttermaker that we need, but he's definitely a fun Buttermaker to have.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, or like you said, he's very charismatic, so like every time he's on screen cracking one of his jokes, you're having a good time.
Yeah. Whereas I think when you're looking at the runtime on both of these films, which I think is actually a little preposterous in both films.
Yeah, a little on the long side.
I mean, it's not a hard watch because, like, as I'm watching, I never felt like this is still happening. Like, I felt like both films pace very well. I just don't know why they were as long as they were. I noticed the runtime when I was looking at the runtime, not necessarily when I was watching the film, so it's not a big sin. But when you're talking about a comedy, especially kind of geared towards a younger audience, I still have to say I think because I don't know if it actually is. 2-hour movies is unnecessary for a comedy geared towards, like, kids.
Yeah.
If it is. Oh, well, some of your small changes. I'll get into this one. I think this fits in line with what we're talking about. I do appreciate a lot of the more mature jokes in the remake, like when they go to Hooters and stuff like that, and they're singing cocaine.
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
What do you think about the change of the sponsors between the two films?
I thought, saying what you said before, I thought it was a twist just for twist's sake. They show us the bail bonds in the remake, and then it's revealed that it's actually a strip club, and then you see I guess it's the strippers in the crowd just cheering on the boys.
Bo Peep's Gentlemen's Club.
Bo Peep's Gentlemen's Club. I thought it was okay. I don't think you needed it, but I guess you have to kind of up the original somehow, so strip club kind of makes sense. So ultimately, I thought it was kind of meh. I thought I was okay with it.
Yeah, I felt that the inclusion of, like, the strippers in the audience was a little flat.
That was a little much. Like, that wouldn't really happen. Like, these strippers, they got to sleep during the day, Reggie. They got to make their money at night.
It's a legitimate business. They pay taxes.
Yeah.
Another funny line. His sort of womanizing, as it were, when he hooks up with the kid's mom and kid asks why he's there, and he comes up with some bullshit line.
Got to oil your mitt. Oil that mitt.
Oil the mitt. That's a new move. I haven't done that one yet. Like I said, I think that it fits the tone and character of the film, but it does ultimately, I think, because they're going beat for beat. I mentioned this before, but I think it takes away from his relationship with Amanda, because I never felt like the mom was a factor in the same way the original film does. Like, I don't see where he fits in with Amanda's life after this, whereas like I can see Buttermaker kind of turning here and becoming a part of Amanda's life and Amanda's mom's life, because it feels like it's there. The reason they kind of broke up isn't as extreme in the original, and like you kind of want that type of arc for Buttermaker, whether it happens or not. Like, you want the potential for it, whereas there's no upside for Billy Bob Thornton to get back into his relationship with this person that we know nothing really about.
He's got strippers in their 20s. I mean, what does he need to go back to this Amanda's mom for?
Yeah, he's hanging out with Destiny. Paradise.
Paradise, of course.
It's all the same.
How dare you confuse Paradise with Destiny?
I don't know. I liked some of that mystery in the original. Like, it felt a lot flatter in the remake for him to be like, yeah, I've been going for 3 years. He never really seems remorseful about it, whereas you can tell that there's a conflict in the original with that relationship that obviously is more pronounced because he's not dating other people. So it's sadder. It's like this guy needs to like kind of get back to living. Billy Bob Thornton's living the whole time.
Yeah. I thought about that too. Like, if this movie was originally made like now, he probably would end up with the mom. Like, I don't know. I thought of Mighty Ducks for some reason. Like, Bombay ends up with Charlie's mom. That's exactly what they would do. I'm really glad the original did it, and they kind of left it kind of up in the air. Like, there is the possibility of it because, you don't see Walter Matthau's Buttermaker with women. But like you said, you do see Billy Bob just womanizing all the time. There is no reason, or there's less reason for him to really develop this relationship with Amanda, because he doesn't need to get with her mom anymore. He's having the time of his life with these fucking... How is he getting these 20-year-olds? He's in his 50s. I don't understand. No, I'm not jealous, Reggie. Stop asking me that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I liked what the original did. I think overall, like, I really like how sort of subtle the original really moves. And it's like, the remake is a lot more, like... on purpose, obvious, like yuck, joke for joke's sake, but it just feels more real the way the original operates at times. There's, like I said, there's some moments where like, oh, that wouldn't fucking happen like that, but overall, I'd say that the original just has the overall tone, pace, flow. It just feels more real than the remake.
Yeah, that subtlety comes into play because, like I said, we had the part where we were discussing potential. Sort of like race talk in the film, and it's like you're right. It's like not really there. It's not like over the top. So like, is it there? Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. Like, there's a lot more of that crossplay where it's like so subtle that like some things could be picked up on. You may be reading into things that aren't quite there. You may be missing things that are there. The movie's a lot more open ended in that way. It allows you as an audience member to sort of make your own choices about what you're seeing, which is, I think, how we get to some of the places that we are in our conversation. I also think that, again, these changes, which are meant to, increase the jokes, sort of change the tone of the film. The way that Amanda talks in the film and how she's trying to be more mature and sort of ladylike early on, when you take the mom completely out of the picture, like you did in both films, it makes it potentially more inappropriate for her to be hanging out with this guy. I don't think that they're really trying to make that message, but like those two have a lot of conversations about sex and sexuality that like this guy who's dating the strippers, who's making lines about, I thought she was 18. I don't know if I want this guy hanging out with that kid.
Yeah. Yeah, I got that vibe too, because she does look older. It does get borderline creepy at times, where it's like he's going in for like kisses on her forehead. It's like, that seems inappropriate, even though because she looks really old for her age. She really it was around 12 or 13, but like it could definitely be misinterpreted as something else.
Of course, the movie's not saying that, and of course, that's not what's happening. But like when you look at the character, like in the universe building, because I like to talk about that in films, you've created this guy who has a reputation for dating younger women, who has a reputation of getting around town. People are going to ask questions when he's going to the beach with this random 13-year-old, independent of like anyone else. Like the mom needs to come into play at some point, I think, because otherwise, yeah, they can hang out. Or I'll see you around town, kid. Like those types of lines make sense. But like, yeah, me and you are going to go like hang out again. It's not the same film. Yes, they hit the same beats, but those two characters are so different between the film that original point is not there, and it doesn't actually, from the sense of who this character is, I don't think that I want to see that as an audience member. I'm not getting that same moment that you're getting in the original film.
Yeah, fucking Chris Hansen's gonna pop out in the third act.
She literally says at one point, not to go there, but like, he's like, oh, you must have a big one. I don't know what else my mom sees.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that line.
I'm like, dude, let's skate past this, because that's not the right tone for a fucking kid's baseball movie.
I mean, I'll defend it as, it's a fucking Bad News Bears, it's not a really PC source material, so they're going for those edgy jokes, and yeah, some of them aren't in the best tastes, but, overall, I'm not going to think he's a pedophile.
No, I'm not.
I know they're not going to do anything, so I'll let it slide. It's not the funniest joke, it is low-hanging fruit, literally, but, like, yeah, what are you going to do?
Yeah, like I said, I agree that I'm not saying that that's what's happening here, but there's enough subtext that it's like, it's not that he's a pedophile, it's just like, I never thought that now he should hang out with this kid. He didn't have the type of turn where I'm like, I get that she wants to and she misses the way things used to be. It's not the same relationship as in the original film when you kind of break it down. Like, okay, I guess it's sweet that he's going to like take her to the beach and start hanging out with her again, but like, I don't think that he's made enough of a character turn that I think that still not appropriate for him to be hanging out with this little kid, because he might be a better guy, but he's still not a good guy. That's what I got to say.
All right, that about covers like all our topics. I guess I just wanted to briefly talk about the music a little bit.
Yeah.
Both movies use music from the opera Carmen, and I didn't really have much to say. It's just that I really appreciated the remake using that music again, because I feel like it's not the Bad News Bears unless you have some fucking opera music juxtaposition over the terrible ball playing of the Bad News Bears.
I like that juxtaposition. I really enjoyed it in the first film. A very interesting soundtrack for the type of film it is, and I think that it's great, and I'm glad they stuck with it as well.
So is there anything else you want to talk about, Reggie, or should we just get to our verdicts here?
I think this is a good time to get to the verdicts, because when it comes to the film, I felt that we landed a lot of the messaging that we needed to. We need to talk about the difference between the Buttermakers, the Amanda character, and just the teams in general, and we talked a lot about the tone. So there's really not much more to say, because when you break down past that, they're more or less the same film with just a few differences in how they hit the beats.
So with that, Reggie, should the remake Bad News Bears exist?
I don't know if we're both on the same page about this, but I'll say this. I think because Billy Bob Thornton is so charismatic, and because they land a lot of jokes and make the movie, while hitting a lot of the same parameters, like it's clearly the Bad News Bears film repackaged, the jokes shine. There's some cheap ones, there's some low-hanging fruit, like you mentioned, but I liked how charismatic Billy Bob Thornton was. It does slightly change the film, but because it does change the film in that way, I think that the remake should exist, with the caveat that they should have probably branched out in some spaces to make it fit the movie they actually made, instead of trying to shoehorn in these jokes into this old script, because some things don't land properly because the tone has shifted. So it's not the same film. They shouldn't try to just do the same film. But I think it did enough, and it did enough in the same vein while modernizing it, that I felt this should exist. I don't have any major overarching problems with the film, so I got no problem with it existing. Not to say it's my favorite film, but it works more or less.
All right, so I told you before we started recording this podcast, I was still on the fence I had no idea which way I was going to go with this. I was leaning one way. We had a pretty in-depth discussion. We ripped on the remake a lot.
Sure.
But I made my decision, and I'm with you. I think the remake should exist. I was surprised with your verdict. I thought you were going to say no. But I was really thinking about it, and like I said to you before we started recording, it's they're both comedies, and a lot of those jokes in the remake, they landed with me. There's a lot more of those jokes. I think the original is a much better film overall with what it does. I think the remake plays it maybe a little too safe by not really deviating from the formula. Sure, it maybe says some more racy jokes of our time, but you know, they didn't really try to develop the characters anymore. They didn't try to go anywhere really different with the characters, except maybe making Buttermaker more of a ladies' man. But you know, I had a good time watching the remake. I didn't hate it. And I was laughing a lot. I think I was laughing a lot more, actually, than the original, which isn't to say that it's the better film. Like I said, I think the original overall is better. But I still had a really good time watching the remake. And I think this is a kid's film. I think kids are really going to enjoy the remake, too, just because there are more of those jokes. You know, the more adult humor is going to go over their heads, but there's a lot of kind of low-hanging fruit stuff that they'll get a good kick out of. And I think the original also is just a bit rough around those edges. You know, like I said, Walter Matthau he's a little violent, and that might, you know, scare some kids. While I think the original is the better film, I think the remake is fine and should absolutely exist.
I think well said there, Dan. The original film is a better movie.
Hands down. If I have to watch it again, if I had to pick personally, I'm gonna watch the original. Definitely.
Yeah, because like once you know the jokes in the remake, there's not much more to talk about. You know, if you've heard the jokes, and it's good to hear them, and I enjoyed them, but like if I had to watch it again and like knowing the twist and where the beats are, I don't need to see that again. Whereas I think that there's a more endearing, heartwarming story in the original.
Definitely.
That's not there in the remake.
Yeah, I was more proud of those kids, the way they kind of just took it at the end. We're like, fuck you, shove that up your ass. We're going to have these beers and fucking celebrate. Yeah, I was really rooting for those kids in the original a lot more than in the remake.
I think where that kind of comes from is because, again, tonally, Buttermaker, like you say, he's got his sort of violent moments. The kids are really the ones that have most of the personality throughout the film. And like by that point where it's the kids' choice to tell them to shove it up their ass.
Yeah.
Whereas Buttermaker in the remake is sort of exhibiting this behavior the whole time.
Yeah.
And right before they get the trophy, he kind of has this, "Oh, let's get this over with" line. You know, it's like it's kind of expected for that reaction. Whereas in the original, like it kind of comes out of nowhere, and it's probably one of the reasons the film has sort of stood the test of time because they don't do the cheesy thing where the kids who weren't good win the whole thing. They lose.
Yeah.
But fuck them. Like, exactly. Take this trophy and shut up your ass.
I loved it. And they don't do the, "You're all right, LaRusso." You know, they don't go for that Karate Kid ending. He's like, "I'm all right. Fuck you. Shove it up your ass." I loved it.
It's like, yeah, you didn't want us to play. We played your game. We got to your level, and like we still could have won the game, but we basically did the right thing by letting everyone play.
Yeah.
You guys were dicks the entire time. It's such an interesting sort of like, again, it's subtle, but like this play on society where it's like the people that are the bad actors, the real bad people aren't the bears. It's these assholes that are keeping kids from playing baseball who have like turned this like basically children's game into like this ultra competitive, like shitty thing. And then at the end they're like, well, you know, because they won, they're like, oh, well, it's good playing, you guys. You did a great job. And,
it's like, you know, they're full of shit. So it's like, take your apologies, shove it up your ass. I know you're bullshitter. I know who you fucking really are. Yeah. Fuck you.
Exactly. It's like, dude, 1 inning ago you're hitting your son, and now you're holier than thou things. Like, yo, literally shut up your ass, and it's so satisfying.
I loved that ending of that original movie. I thought it was an amazing ending. It's one of the best endings I've seen of a children's film, like, ever.
I 100% agree that like everything's fun up to that point. Like I said, it's a little some things are dated, but overall it hits all these very interesting beats that you're not expecting, and then that ending is we say this word a lot, but iconic. Like the way that ends is so freaking cool, and there's more oomph in that original that you're not getting in the remake, because I think you've almost inundated the film with too many punchy sort of lines like that.
Yeah.
That it doesn't mean as much in the end, and they're not drinking real beer, which
yeah, that's right. I mean, there's a lot of jokes in the remake, but yeah, it does take away a little bit from that ending because there's just joke after joke after joke. So having one more joke is just exactly another joke, but like. Yeah. You've kept this kind of, like I said, the original just feels like a little more grounded in reality, following the rules of like what would really happen in real life. The remake definitely feels a little more produced, Hollywood and everything. So I really enjoyed the ride of the original, but the remake was still fine.
Yes, that's the takeaway. That in this case, like 1-to-1, yeah, the original kicks ass and is a better film overall. But Billy Bob's take, his charisma, the jokes, even the interaction, like the kids, I don't think we talked about this enough in both films, but like those kids do a great job in both films. Like
absolutely, yeah. Except for Kelly in the remake.
Yeah, except for Kelly in the remake, but he's not a kid, so.
Yeah.
But like,
he's a college professor and shit.
Fun film. Both of them are fun films. The original has a better message, a little bit more heart. But I don't hate that they did a remake. Here we are.
Wow, I really thought you were going to say you were shitting on the remake so much. I was like, oh, fuck, I'm going to disagree with Reggie here.
No, it's like the things that I'm shitting on are like those little intangibles. Like what makes a movie from being like decent, I would say maybe this is a good film, but it's at least a decent film. What stops it from being great is that some of the messaging gets muddied, and I think that there are opportunities that get left on the table that if they took that extra step and they made just a few more changes, this could have been a great film, a great remake. And instead what we have is a decent remake that was worth a watch, but not much more than that.
I agree with that, man. Cool. Awesome. So we're on the same page. So with that, let's pick our next episode. All right, so we just did a comedy, and the week before last time we did an action movie.
Let's get back into a drama. I think horror we can come back around.
Oh, okay. You know what? You know what's an interesting one? Might be Vanilla Sky, maybe?
I think Vanilla Sky, right now, I think we'd have a pretty good, interesting conversation about that.
That'd be a good one because it's based on the film Open Your Eyes, Spanish film, with the same actress, Penelope Cruz, who I fucking love. So... Okay, so Vanilla Sky, and it's been the original in Spanish, Open Your Eyes.
You can sign off. Is this, really quick, though, is this the first time we're watching a remake that's not essentially titled the same?
All right, tell them where to find you, Reggie.
Yep. I'm Reggie Parker. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at RPComedy, rpcomedy.com.
All right, and I'm Dan Bulick. You could find us now. Reggie, we have a Twitter social media thing. What do you call it? Twitter handle? We have a Twitter handle. There we go. So you could just message us directly on Twitter at Retro versus Remake. You could also follow us on Facebook at Retro versus Remake, and we have our own YouTube channel, Retro versus Remake, where we post all these, and soon we're going to start posting videos of us too, not just the audio portion. So stick around for that. Like, comment, subscribe, give us 5 stars on iTunes. Any comments helps us out. Really appreciate it, guys. Other than that, thanks for listening. And this has been another episode of Retro versus Remake.